Hi, I want to talk to you tonight about moral development in children. And knowing that you've done something wrong comes from within, and it's called a guilty conscience. And we've all felt that at some point in our lives. And what that is that's when we know what we've done is wrong, and based on our beliefs and our upbringing of good moral values, we know what's right and we know what's wrong, and that has been instilled in us since childhood. And we also know that when we get this guilty conscience, it's because we didn't act on what was consistent in line with our values. And when that happens, that's when we get that feeling of guilt or anxiety and worry, because that's that guilty conscience. So I personally learned my moral values growing up as a young child. I was born into a Christian family and with strong moral values, and they were in line with my faith. And I went to a Christian school and I went to a Christian church, and the people in my life, they all shared the same values that I did. I was surrounded by them. And so, back in the day, times were different. And, the old adage of it takes a village to raise a child, that's what it was back then. And so, adults were adults, and anyone older than you was an authoritative figure, and we were raised to be respectful of them regardless of who they were, whether they were our parents, our neighbors, our teachers, our principals, and they all helped to raise us. And it's not like that anymore. Back in the day, we had the traditional families where we had two-parent families raising children, and grandparents, and extended families with aunts and uncles and all of that. And now we have the new age families where things are just different. And I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just different. And we don't have such great family ties as we used to when I was growing up. And so, with each generation, I feel like somehow we're losing some of our moral values that was deeply rooted within us in our generation. And so we need to make sure that we as childhood teachers are bringing that moral character into our classrooms, and we're teaching it. So how do we go about teaching children values? Well, we definitely have to implement it in our curriculum. It definitely needs to be a part of our curriculum. We need to model it as adults. We need to encourage the children to do the same thing. We need to give them situations. We need to give them scenarios and ask them, talk about it. What would you do if? And let them tell us what they would do and how they would act if a certain situation arose, to kind of give them practice, so that if and when it does happen, they know what to do and it's in line with their values. And so we need to be doing that. We need to teach them. And then definitely also too is find those teachable moments. So if something happens in the classroom, just watch it and see what happens. And then if the child acts like they should, in line with their moral values, celebrate that victory and talk about it and share it with the classroom, and use that as a very teachable moment of what we should do in the moment when those situations arise. And then, another thing also that we need to talk about is cultural diversity and how that affects moral development. So, every culture is different, and I'm not saying culture meaning, people from a different country. I'm even talking, even the North from the South is even different. The South is very much about yes ma'am, no ma'am, and things of that nature, whereas not every culture is like that. So we need to take that into consideration when we are teaching moral values, and we need to be a little bit sensitive to everybody's different culture and their upbringing. And some cultures view emotions as signs of weakness, so we need to be careful that we're not infringing on different cultures, and just be a little bit more sensitive, and also maybe possibly even being a little bit lenient as far as American standards of, yes ma'am, no ma'am. You can still be respectful to adults without saying yes ma'am, no ma'am. We have a culture too of, being very touchy-feely and huggy, and not a lot of cultures are like that. So again, we need to be sensitive to different cultures about how we interpret what's right and wrong, and morals and beliefs and things of that nature. But to wrap this up, I just want to say that as teachers in the classroom, we have to be teaching character development. We have to make sure that moral character is being taught in our classrooms, because at the end of the day, if we're not teaching it, we can't expect that parents are doing it, because they may or may not be. But if we're not doing it, guess who is? The television and YouTube, where there's nothing but violence and aggression and things that are not morally in line with what we want our children to be in this next generation. So please be an advocate for children and teach moral values in your curriculum. Thank you.